a third generation tire guy, past president of the Tire Industry Association and current director of global mining, a big division at Purcell Tire. Mason Hess has spent nearly 30 years in the OTR and mining industry. Welcome, Mason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So jumping right into it, giving your mining background, what do you think makes it so different, other than the obvious, versus like every other segment in our industry?
Yeah, like you said, the obvious is, well, it's big and heavy and all that kind of stuff. But I think probably the biggest thing and what I enjoy the most about it is the nerd side. I always say this. People probably get tired of me saying I'm a tire nerd, but in that industry, the tires are so big and expensive, it almost demands attention. So, if you were at a retail location and you wanted to explain to the buyer or the old lady or whatever it is, hey, the compound of your tire will improve 2.5% if you buy this or do this or do that. You probably fall asleep on you, right? So in the mining, it's actually really good because people sit on the edge of their chairs sometimes. Not always. Sometimes they're busy with 100 other problems. But when you get into that nerd side of the tire business, in regards to performance and wear and the right tread and carrying capacities and TMPHs and all that kind of stuff, people pay attention. So for me, a tire nerd by self-defined is that's the place to be. But the costs obviously are another thing. The mining side, people say, oh, yeah, we should get into the mining side of it. Well, the investment side is, a tire handler to handle 25 or maybe even a 30,000 pound tire and wheels. You're looking at $1 million. If you put that thing on a large forklift or even a large loader, that's just one tire handler. And then you got tire trucks at 500 to $700,000 a piece, and all the other service trucks, the smaller ones, and those are still $250,000. So I currently have a few teams of guys that they live in bunkhouses and they travel remotely and they live in man camps and that kind of stuff where you could go down to a truck center or whatever truck stop and see a tire guy there. Well, he goes home every night and maybe doesn't require much for tools. But obviously, these guys, they'll hop on planes every other week and get on boats and travel up into man camps and work on the ground. And um, it's it's quite a bit different. It's still a tire business, but it's pretty specialized.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Before we jumped on, because I'm not really a mining expert, I was looking at a four ply 70. It's a Firestone. It was for sale for like 180K, and they said it's something like close to 15,000 pounds just the tire. So
Yeah, I'll make
quite
you
a
a
bit.
deal. I'll sell it to you for 140. So
I said,
no,
wow.
it's called the 7070. Is probably the tire you're looking at. It's on
Yeah.
a
I
giant
mean, I was
giant
just like,
loader type deal. So, and the other side of it is when it comes to there's a pressure for the retail customer to get your car fixed for your wife or the
yeah.
customer, but the pressure for a loading unit and like that tire you were talking about, 7070 tire that goes on a Laterno 2350 or even sometimes 994, the new Ks and the bigger models, but they're what they call a primary loading unit. So this unit is what loads haul trucks. And if that unit goes down, not only is the loader down or the loading unit's down, you have maybe 8 or 10 trucks running off that shovel or that truck. So you're looking at 5,000 to 10,000 an hour on the haul truck, and it's going to take you a while to get down there with your tools and your jacks and all that kind of stuff. So um, the pressure that you get compared to the mother-in-law at getting her tires rotated versus a haul truck or a loading unit down, it's pretty intense. But they demand efficiency and skill and kind of a little bit like NASCAR. It's
Mm.
not always changing tires, but you're definitely 100% ready to change tires when you're called upon. So,
So your operation or the mining operation from the tire side is, from what I'm understanding, it's like you're also part of the whole mining operation in terms of keeping the whole operation going versus like grandma's car or my car.
Yeah,
You're really
we
just
do.
okay.
Usually, when we get contracted in, we'll do all the tires. We'll do the little tires and the big tires. And the mines are a wonderful place in the sense that um, there's great relationships that you build there over time, and when you create tire programs, and then you become part of their team or their family.
Hmm.
Now it seems a little cliche, but you're working in an intense environment all the time. And like I mentioned with the previous story with pressure. So everyone around there, when you're under that kind of pressure and that kind of um, situation, you grow close to people and to the point where they count on you and you count on them. And sometimes the tire handler breaks and we lean on the mine to say, hey, we need to get this windshield replaced or whatever it is. And likewise, they'll call upon us and say, "Hey, we got two loaders down right now, or two haul trucks. We really need to get this one up first." And you flex and bend, so you become part of that ecosystem of maintenance a lot of times, or even operations when it comes to helping them get it
So you said before, like your teams literally live in a, what did you call it? Like a bunkhouse?
done. A man camp is
A man camp? A man.
I handled Mexico for some years and we'd go down. It's pretty adventurous, and where the guys will fly in or I fly in and you go into these remote areas. The mines aren't in, downtown Phoenix. They're off in the corners of the world.
Hmm.
And you got to go to these places and they house you and they feed you. And but you got to get there. And so that's good. Like we have guys that'll, I think it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off is one of them. Other ones will live in man camps, but they might only go 4 on, 4 off type schedules. But you flex and bend. The mines obviously run 365, 24 hours a day. Thanksgiving Day, they're going to be moving copper. So they don't stop and they'll take a break for shift change out, and that's about it. So there's no real, hey, let all the trucks park and then we'll go check them all. You got to work in between maintenance and field docks and stuff like that to try to get some of that work done.
That must take a certain type of individual to be able to do that, right? Year after year. So I imagine after a certain time, it's like you become a lifer, I would imagine, and folks don't really leave after you, or not true.
Yeah, there you have the group. It's probably like any industry, like
Yeah.
mechanics. You have the lifers. And I call them the unicorns, right? So they're pretty rare and unique, but they are special, And I don't want to call them pretty because they'll tease me, but they're very rare. So, and then you have the younger guys that'll come in that are very attracted maybe to the money, uh, and but they find out it's a lot of work and living remote's hard. Newly married. Sometimes the younger guys they hear all the good and then they find out it's actually really hard work. Um, and then you have the guys in between that'll transition out. And those are the ones that are exciting for me because you get to mentor those ones that they clear that first stage a little bit. And they're the guys that are actually going to be lifers, right? They're going to
Hmm.
hopefully be there all the time. Not that they need to stay or they'll stay in that tire changing position, but they ramp up. They become the crew member. They become the site, what we call a working manager. So they fill in, and then they become maybe regional guys and work their way through the tire industry. And that part's really fun because I got guys around me right now that are in management and regional deals. They all came from being tire guys. And so we talked about this at one of the OTR conferences a few years ago about, look around the room, that OTR conference, and you look around the room, most of those people in that room started out with a broom in their hand or a tire bar in their hand or something like that. And they've all been successful, right? To the point where they're at an OTR conference in Florida or wherever we're going, right? And that's a really good message. And I try to preach this all the time that these young tire guys that are coming up that make the comment, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. They see that starting position, and that's all it is. It's kind of like the trajectory point, the launching ramp is working on a slab changing tires. So we got to do as good as we can for this industry to remind them that, hey, getting on that ramp in the beginning, but if you're competent and work hard, shoot, you can move up in income very quickly in our industry. A lot quicker than a lot of other. You go to college and become a lawyer or a doctor, and that progression's slow, right? And you get your own practice, and then maybe
Yeah.
you make a lot of money. But tire guys, man, you can come in young, work hard, move yourself up. Within 5 years, you could, $150,000 a year. It's a very, very good way to make a living. And me personally, I'm, obviously selfish in this. The people around my industry and the mining and the tires, they're awesome people. Man.
Hmm.
Our vendors, our customers, they're all really good. So that piece, you got to work at it, obviously, but we got to make sure the people coming into our industry, we got to hold on to them right.
Um, I appreciate that. What is it like in terms of the demand for techs right now? So, like, I just got back from SEMA a couple weeks ago, and with the independent shop being the basic main person walking the floor, they're still struggling to attract and retain tire technicians in their shops, and there's a lot of conversation around that and the extreme turnover. How is it for mining? What do you see it like?
Um, it's just as hard and harder than ever.
Interesting.
So it's the same challenges we see in the commercial and retail a little bit is that um, there's a magnet on one side where people can stay home and not work, and there's a magnet that kind of pulls people that don't let them get into the workforce that we need, especially in blue collar. And then there's the side of we compete in blue collar, right? So when you look at, I don't know how many people are in the blue collar world at least in the U.S., but it's a lot. And you have mechanics and farmers and construction workers and skilled trades and plumbers and all that kind of stuff. Well, we're in that group too, right? So if we have to compete in a blue collar specialty area, which that's what I consider tire guys. Obviously, there's a startup, hey, go, just change tires all day, but it grows, right? It grows into skilled labor very quickly as they get into bigger tires and managing fleets. But if, for example, if electricians pay 35 bucks an hour, or in our mining world, to specific to your question, if the mine's paying mechanics $35 to $45 an hour, and I bring in a tire guy at $25 an hour or $35 an hour, that mine will gobble him up real quick, especially in these remote areas, because there's really not a body of labor, to pull
Mm.
from there. You got to bring them in. You got to get them in that local area. So they're really hard to get in those local areas because they go work for the mine. So I have to kind of man camp, ship guys in, and do that kind of stuff to kind of labor. So, but I guess it's hard. It's hard. You got to pay them to kind of get them away, or not get them away, but keep them from falling out of the tire business and going into other industries like
So you're
truck
saying
tire.
they're leaving to other blue collar type opportunities that pay more, or even just basically losing them to the mine after you've done all that work to kind of get them into the role?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times the mines will offer bonus programs and stuff for production, throughout. So there's a lot of benefits there, and then the pay rates, and we pay well, but um, a lot of times it's just it's quite like a Tech 6 or a Tech 5 inside the mine would make 45 to 50 inside the mines. And in some cases, we pay up to 50, some of those examples I was talking about in these remote areas. But when you're pulling from a labor pool that's, if there's 100 guys and electricians need so many and mines need so many, those types of things, it gets really hard. So, but it's always going to be a challenge. And I heard it said a while back that it's not a labor shortage if you can get out of it with pay. And at first I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. But I thought about that a lot, that what they meant by it is we can get people, and it's a true statement, is we can get tire guys at any level of the industry. You just got to pay more, right? And that is the silver lining. Is I've talked to other dealers and stuff that the silver lining in all this, in the shortage side of it, is hopefully it'll raise the bar of the pay for our tire technicians, right? And in that, it's a double fold benefit for us. One, we get tire guys that get to make more money, right, which is
Hmm.
awesome. But the other part is we get a higher caliber of person sometimes. Obviously, if you pay minimum wage, you get a group of people in there. But when you're paying, $40 an hour, people might compete at that rate. Now you get to pick and choose, and that's where the unicorns come in a little bit, and then you can hold on to them. So
What about, so do your folks that you're talking about, do they have like baseline knowledge that they're coming from at least like regular OTR, like local, before you're shipping them out to mines, or?
yeah, we definitely go through. We hold to the TIA standards to start everyone, and then and refresh on annual basis and all that. But there's a progression. Not that we won't bring in a guy that only has truck tire business or skills or experience. We'll bring them in, but then we mentor them or put them with skilled guys, and then they work to do that stuff. I got a young kid right now. He worked for Discount Tire. He goes to my church, and good kid, and so we got him on, and he's green, right? He's done basically tires at Discount, but he loves the industry, and he's a guy we're going to invest in. We're just going to keep throwing training at, and put him with people, and he's our what we call our Swiss Army guy. He kind of delivers and does a bunch of odds and ends for us and stuff like that. But
What made you say it's harder than ever? Because I like what we're seeing on our side is we're actually seeing a tick up in layoffs and increased cost of living. So I would imagine that supply is actually starting to tick up.
yeah, the harder than ever part is at least around my purview,
Yep.
is we have a lot of older gentlemen that are retiring, at least around my group, and my reach. And those guys are retiring a lot quicker than I'm ready for, or our industry. And that old knowledge is almost irreplaceable. We call them plug and play, where you have to add maybe a manager behind every three new guys, because that old tire guy with all the experience, he didn't need to call four people to get something figured out.
Ah,
Right? He could just handle it. He'd go to the warehouse and get the part. He'd go to the operations guy and go say, and you get the truck in the morning. And the new guys don't have that. They might know how to air up a tire and do some of that stuff, but the bigger picture stuff, they need a
yeah.
lot of help. So
A lot of the peak boomers are retiring over the next 5 years, and that's a lot of that's kind of a different problem, I guess, right? And that
yeah,
we don't have the succession plan, maybe. Um,
yeah, and I guess
yeah,
to that point, and the other part is, when you get into the highly skilled and maybe even more dangerous or remote areas, that's a little bit more precise with the older guys retiring, because it's kind of unicorns, it's unique.
yeah,
And then in the maybe the volume retail business, you have a lot of bodies coming out. AI and all that stuff is freeing up some unemployment, or the unemployment is going up. So we should, in that side of the industry, have some choices, and maybe some people that say, what, maybe I'll be a tire guy. But in the specialty, that's slow. That's going to take a long time, maybe, to trickle up. They don't walk out of maybe some of those jobs and trip into the mining business. I wish they would.
sure.
I could use them.
Yeah, but to your point, it sounds like a great opportunity for a lot of folks that are willing to put in the work and travel and be away. I think that's the hardest part of a lot of our roles in the tire industry. Even if you look at like as a manufacturer sales rep, it sounds glamorous to go around with a corporate credit card if you're younger and
Yeah,
wine and dine folks. But after a couple years, sitting at Delta Terminal, missing your flight, coming home on a Friday night,
yeah.
you start
Driving
to wonder
across the
really.
Salt Lake City airport, one side
Yeah,
to the other. Yeah,
it's a special type of breed that could do it right week in and week out.
yeah, yeah.
What question did you have any questions for me around the shortages or what we're seeing big
Yeah,
picture
I,
wise?
I I think, like I mentioned to you earlier, is that you have a perspective of kind of hunting, if you will, or trying to find users and tire guys for a long period. Do you see that side of it freeing up, like on the specialty side, precisely? Are you seeing more people call in and say, you know what, I'd be interested, put my name in a bucket, and that type? Has that gone up on your side, or
Yeah, I think we're in a weird time of what we're seeing, so I'll give you kind of a long-winded answer to yes and no. So, um, a lot of so like if we go back to COVID, right? If you were breathing and walking, you were able to demand pay and skip around, and a lot of folks that were looking for top dollar were able to get it and skip around. If you fast forward all the way today, the pendulum has swung quite a bit in terms of more back towards the company side, where we're now seeing this phenomenon called job hugging, where folks are actually they're scared of losing their job. So there's a few different drivers, right? So AI being one of them. AI is, I mean, is AI really going to impact, guys installing tires at the mine or in general anywhere? I don't think so, right? I think
anytime soon? Yeah.
not anytime soon. We could probably agree on that, but it definitely is impacting. Let's say like paralegal. You brought up lawyers before, and anything that's more of like that corporate level role of like the really junior roles. So like think of marketing, paralegal, whatever that role may be, junior financial analyst. Anecdotally, and from like my research, what I'm seeing is that those jobs are being heavily impacted. So if you're a new college grad, um, you're having a difficult time more than likely finding one of those roles. As a manager in one of those positions, like in a corporate level position, if AI is really able to replace a junior person, then I don't have to train them. I don't have to worry about them. It's just like we're putting the Iron Man suit on the junior manager or manager now instead of hiring the junior, right? Problem with that though is we're not training our future, right? Um, More towards like getting closer to the tire industry. When we think about the tariffs and what happened there, I think a lot of the larger companies that we saw maybe had some layoffs earlier in the year. Um, and this margin compression that we're seeing maybe on the more of the manufacturing side, doing less with more is what we're seeing. So that's definitely freed up a lot of niche talent in our industry where we're seeing folks with turnkey backgrounds looking for work that maybe weren't available a few years ago, right? But if we look more on the tech side, I think I would lean more towards what you're saying, where I think those types of backgrounds are just always in demand and always getting gobbled up, like the good ones, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's pretty much what we see. It's such a specialized. Anytime we've handled a search like anywhere near your world, it's extremely specialized. These guys don't so when you think of the type of recruiting that we do, typically the roles that we're hunting for, right? These are not folks that are on your normal mediums of LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So even find they're unicorns to your point, right? So if now
Yeah.
we're dialing all the way back into your roles, um, they're in a remote place in the world for let's say 2 weeks at a time, right? They're not driving in a car, they're not accessible, so they're really out of touch in that sense. So someone like me would probably say, and you have to look at not just like hunting for others, but like how do we have a succession plan like that DTC guy that you brought in maybe from a completely different segment and keep bringing them into like your bench, and then the certain ones kind of level up. I think it's extremely difficult for smaller organizations to like really. I don't know if there's tiny outfits. I'm sure at your level you could replicate something like that. So I know I said a lot there. I'll pause there.
Yeah, it's a good point with some of that stuff on the I guess the turnover, right? And the piece that worries me probably the most and affects me the most is the amount of skills and effort you put. I heard a podcast. I was traveling a couple weeks ago, and it was the CEO for Ford, and he made a comment that he had 6,000 open positions for mechanics, senior mechanics that paid 100 and I think he said $25,000 a year,
Wow.
right? So to my point of this, hey, we're competing. He has the openings. It's going to take him 4 or 5 years to get skilled to make that master mechanics change diesel, motors and Ford trucks type deal. But that's his demand. And part of that conversation that really stuck and I worry about and affects me is turnover. So you put all this energy in training. For example, the guy from Discount or Big O, if we put all this time and effort and get that stuff, and it takes years and years, and then they turn over, and frankly, this generation isn't like ours or maybe your dad's, right? They
Yeah.
would go work at Sears for 40 years, get a gold watch, and say I retired, and the cycle of work. But this generation, they turn over. They
In a blink
know
of an
for, and
eye.
especially the skills, they know that, hey, I have a bad day. If I quit today, I get a job tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't know how fix that, or you obviously got to appreciate them, you got to pay them, you got to show them a future and all that kind of stuff. But that's one that, man, it's just such a big investment, and we know that the people are what make the difference, and all of our businesses for the most part. It's, you can buy trucks and you can buy tools, but you get
Yeah, I
bad
couldn't agree
people
I
versus.
couldn't agree with you more. So let's say I have a conversation with the VP of HR, runs some pretty big plants in the US, making tires, old school way, new school way, and he says, this Gen Z generation, he's never seen anything like it. Well, they'll just pick up and leave. They don't have a job, and where are you going? Where did you what world did you get? No, I'm just not. I'm
Yeah,
going. I live home with mom. I don't care, right? So that could be part of it in terms of like the truly young side, but on the other side of it, they have different wants and needs than we don't do. So I think it's um, from what the data shows, right? Like um, looked at a McKinsey study, and the Gen Z generation is the least. Um, they're the least concerned about money compared to any other generation as a whole. They care more about us investing in them, and having their other values like flexibility. They find those more important than, let's say, money. But that again, it's not always true for the sense of the baseline dollars need to be there, right? So it gets really complicated. So my summary, as I'm heading into the end of the year, like what does it all mean at the end of the day, and what can we do? We could do some simple things. So like one is like having I always thought it was silly, like growing up when I was younger, but having a true mission vision statement for our companies and what we're doing and getting their buy-in, because I think this generation really does care more about words like sustainability, let's say, than maybe some of the older folks in our industry really do, right? If I use one word for an example where it's really important to them, and tying them into it's not just a job. The other reality of what you mentioned is like I don't think that these folks are willing to work in one role for 40 years, or at least in the
yeah,
beginning. They're going to need to go through like a few different stints to kind of figure out where they want to be. So if you are one of their first opportunities, like the odds are pretty stacked up against you, but you never know. At the end of the day, it's like
yeah,
I think it's just to your point, it's more than a gamble. It's a gamble more than ever to invest in someone. So it's like, how do you as an owner of a company really drive that cost down and just know, like, what if we flip it and when we say we know that we're only going to get X years out of someone, how do we rethink the way that we're even going to do this? I don't know if that's the answer. I'm just saying
yeah.
people need to kind of think
Believe
that
me,
way.
I've scratched my head on that one for a long time, and there's retention bonuses, and there's escalating retention bonuses. So every year that they stay, they get a bonus, and then it grows because that
Mm,
turnover cost. You look at your investment in training and stuff like that. I've seen mines actually do that successfully, where they'll get people in and train them and go through that whole process, and they don't. It's too expensive to lose them, and they put all this time and effort into them. So um,
like a long-term
like the
retention.
idea that I haven't really done it successfully, but I'm not going to give up on it. Like you said, we just got to find a way to. keep them around and get them to the top of the mountain. Right now, in the beginning when you start, it's hard. It's always hard, and they might not see the benefit side. They're just seeing the grind side in the
Hmm.
beginning. You got to get them through the grind, so they can kind of at least get a taste of some of the fun stuff and the good stuff in this business. So
For sure.
yeah,
Well, definitely a lot going on in terms of what you're saying in terms of the shortage. You know, I don't know if anything. The only other, I guess, question I would have is, now that I'm thinking about it more, instead of going after, let's say, or exposing, let's say, Gen Z, what are there any other like transitioning military, or I guess more folks coming from another supply that um are worth taking a look at, maybe from a, like a different angle, if that makes sense, or a different pipeline?
yeah. The where you get, generically speaking, the good tough uh, people that are required for this type of industry, working in a rough area, doing physical labor. Military is a great feeder of that coming out. Plus, they're used to maybe living remotely and
Hmm.
doing some of that remote work. So they're a great option. I played sports in high school and stuff, and I always say athletes, right? Sometimes you take a football player or something that's been through a little bit of it's hard. It's hard to do two a days and that kind of stuff. And there's a toughness that kind of comes along with that too. So I always got my eye on a radar on those types of things. Then ranchers, farmers. There's tough industries and youth that come out of that kind of stuff. You don't always get lucky with those guys, but the trade schools are good, but they're usually um, they get gobbled up. I've been to a few trade shows and job placement things to try to see if I could find, touching different industries and stuff. And I found there was a pretty good bulk of people around firefighting and police. The same type of people that are leaning towards firefighting and maybe even police officers maybe have a tough mindset type deal. But you got to compete with that, working for the city and having those benefits and some of that kind of stuff is tough. But, if you got any secrets, I'd love to hear them, So,
Yeah. Don't have any secrets, but I think maybe if we can talk, as a final topic, really selling the opportunity in terms of like what makes it really exciting, for maybe someone is gonna listen to this that is interested in the mining industry, and then tell us maybe a bit about how they could get in touch with you.
yeah, I think to my point earlier on having to be more of a career. If you look at it as a trajectory of, hey, you come in, yeah, you work out in the field a little bit doing some tough stuff, but that tough stuff is also pretty cool in the sense you're dealing with giant Tonka trucks, in that environment. And just when I said, like, I have cousins and stuff that live in Nebraska and remote areas themselves and stuff, and they'll send me a picture of them feeding a cow or something, and I send them a picture of a giant haul truck tire with chains on it or something. It's just so unique. So there's that side of it. I mentioned earlier the people side is there's just some really good people when you get in those environments where you count on each other. That creates a team deal. So I think if people come through sports or come through military where you're used to an environment where you're around a group or a team that you count on, that's the way the mining tire teams and programs run. You have a group of guys that are all kind of focused. We call ourselves the SEAL team sometimes, Special Forces, um, because of that mindset that, hey, you get four guys. We don't need a brick and mortar store. We can kind of give us some tools and put us on an airplane and we'll go off into a remote area like a SEAL team. So, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, people are trying to provide for their families and look out as a career path. I have a lot of tire guys that are careering in this industry and they're making good livings, putting kids through school. And like I mentioned earlier, some of them that we're mentoring and trying to get those guys transitioned into more opportunities. they're going to be great. I'm going to retire someday, and hopefully they'll do it even better when they come through. So, but as far as getting a hold of me, today's world of the internet, they just look me up on the internet, and hopefully don't believe everything you hear. Right?
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining today,
Yeah, I
Mason.
appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And maybe see you in Orlando.
Yeah, see you then.
Have a great rest of your day.
I
Bye bye.
appreciate it.